הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבשחים גם יוחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבשחים גם יוחד.
Hi, and welcome to Jewish Insights. I'm so excited to introduce my guest today. Dr. Elana Stein Hain is the Rosh Beit Midrash and a senior research fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute of North America. She is the host of Texting, a bi-weekly podcast that considers issues relevant to Jewish life through the lens of classical and modern Jewish text. My favorite episodes is when she has her husband, Rabbi Yonah Hain, as her co-host. She is also the author of Circumventing the Law, Rabbinic Perspectives on Legal Loopholes and Integrity, which uses loopholes as a lens for understanding rabbinic views on law and ethics. I'll add that for me, she is so many things, but I'll just say a teacher of mine, a friend of mine, someone that I look to for guidance, that I would follow into any religious war, for lack of a better term.
Oh, no.
Not that kind of religious war, of course, but someone that I look to for, how to go about living in this world, and also how to think about not only personally moving through the world, but on a more global, larger scale, how to think about the issues that we're facing in this world. It's really a treat to have you here today, Elana.
It's great to be here. I mean, I think that, we used to work together, and I'm just so excited for this move to the Jewish Broadcasting Service, because I think you bring so much to it, and I just can't wait to see how this continues to flourish.
Yeah, as long as I still get to hang out with you, that's most important.
It doesn't have to just be in the interview.
Exactly. Great. All right. So we know at JBS we aired the Hartman Institute's programming this summer, which was amazing. The Community Leadership Program. You had an amazing class on that called Preaching in Times of Crisis, and I know our viewers appreciated that. I know that you spent a lot of time in Israel this summer teaching for a variety of programs at Hartman, and I know you're freshly back. How was Israel?
So I'll say it kind of felt like the first conversations that I had face-to-face with my colleagues in Israel. Everyone was like this close to crying or actually started crying. So I think kind of the level of just emotional depth that people are feeling was very, very evident. I also think that having a lot of Jews from North America, we had Jews from South America, we had Jews from England, seeing an influx of Jews was such a shot in the arm for them, like that we all wanted to be there. So that was kind of huge. I think we are, God willing, as a family, we're going to be spending the year in Israel this coming year. So part of this was also for us and for our kids, thinking about how we want to be in this very, very tumultuous reality. Wow. And I think being there for a month really gave us an opportunity to get a sense of where are people, who are we as sort of outsider insiders. And one of the things I would say I probably had the most interaction with that I hadn't had before was the issue of evacuee families. We were involved, my kids ran a carnival. There was literally a hotel up the street where evacuee families from the South were living. And by the way, for some of them, it was their third hotel that they've been living in this year. And I hadn't really seen that up close this year. And that was sort of another level of understanding the reverberations. So it was good to be there. That's what I would say. And I think people are really struggling, even as they're very strong.
Right. Okay, and say a couple words on the move to Israel. So you're going to Israel next year, you mentioned.
So we've been wanting to do this for years. I really believe, and I talk about this all the time, I really believe that there's like two main covenants in Jewish life. One is what we might call the covenant of Sinai, which it can happen anywhere, it can be done anywhere. You sort of hear what it is that you're supposed to do and become, and there's a lot of imagination. And there's the covenant of Zion, of Zion, which is sort of creating a Jewish society along the lines of a return to home in some way. And so we've kind of wanted to be part of that covenant of Zion for a few years now. And I think it's as good a time as any, I would say. As I said to my colleagues, we can't hug you from across the ocean. And it's kind of a time to recognize that we don't take Israel for granted. Wow. And we can't.
Wow. Beautiful. So I hope
we'll talk again when I come back, or while I'm in the middle, and then we'll see.
Exactly.
We'll see where I'm at with that.
Exactly. Well, you have the test.
But that's where we're.
Amazing.
That's where we're sitting. Even though, by the way, we asked for this before October 7th. Like we started working, but it's still, there's something like a stronger pull.
Great.
I would say.
All right, I'm excited. I'm excited to visit you there. God willing.
Oh my gosh, please.
Yeah. Great.
And all the viewers, Arnona, come on by.
Arnona.
All
right.
We have a backyard. You can all sit, relax, play baseball with my kids. That's right.
Great. All right, so we're speaking of sitting. We're sitting right now in a time of year that's called the 3 weeks, leading up to the holiday of the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av. First, before I go into it, just say a few sentences for our viewer. Just place it for those either who are not familiar or for those who need a refresher. What's going on this time of year?
Okay, so first thing I want to say is we kind of, as Jews, we live in paradigmatic time, meaning like we have these paradigms that recur over and over and over again, right? So Adam and Eve, they're expelled from the Garden of Eden. The Jewish people, they're expelled from the land of Israel, right? Like we have these paradigms. Mm-hmm. So this time is sort of the paradigm of crisis and destruction for the Jewish people. So when you look into rabbinic literature, you'll find the beginning of this time frame, there were 5 things that happened throughout Jewish history, and they're all examples of like breakages, where you're like, something is so wrong here. So for example, there's one that's literally in the book of Numbers, right? No, it's not. Fix that. There's one that's literally in the book of Exodus, in the book of Shemot, where the tablets are broken, where the luchot are broken. That's like an example of the 17th, but then the 17th of Tammuz, which is when this starts, but then it becomes, also on that date, the walls of Jerusalem, as they were under siege by the Romans, were broken through on that date. So it's sort of from kind of Bible to temple, it's a moment of breakage. Something is so wrong here. And there are other examples of what happened on that day also, because that day is a paradigm for breakage. And then 3 weeks later, the 9th of Av, is what I would say is like a paradigm for the end, like a destruction. Really, really, really bad. So go back to the Bible. 9th of Av, the end of these 3 weeks, is when the rabbis say, that's the time when after the spies came back in the book of Numbers and told bad things about the land, that's the time when actually the people were told, you're not going to be able to go into this land. You're not allowed to go into this land. The end of something. And then all the way to temple times, both temples were destroyed on the 9th. But it's even more than that. Even the Bar Kokhba revolt, which was 60 years later, it ended, its last gasp. So you have this period in the Jewish calendar, which I think is so unique. It takes you from a moment of something is very wrong here, something has broken, all the way to whatever it is we thought we were doing has now been destroyed. And the hope is you never want to get to that last part. But I feel on a year like this, I feel like in some ways we've been in these 3 weeks all year long since October 7th. It's something has broken very deeply, whether it's the IDF's capabilities, whether it's a religious breakage that you feel, whether it's a sense of unity that was already breaking last year, whether it's Israel and the world, something is broken and we desperately don't want to see what happens at the end of 3 weeks, the 3 weeks usually now. So I feel like it's a very resonant time, that being in the middle of the crisis.
Wow, beautiful. And just to add, that was beautiful. We express that through certain, practices. I mean, you have a beard.
Right. You're in mourning.
Right.
It's a funny thing. I don't know if this person wants to be named, but a colleague of mine, who I also happen to be married to, decided that after October 7th, he was going to grow his beard. In sort of a mourning kind of sense, because that is a symbol of mourning in Judaism. And he was on campus rabbi at Columbia University. He was on campus and somebody said, why do you have a beard? He said, because in Jewish tradition, the practice is to grow a beard in mourning, when you're in mourning. And I am in mourning, meaning that's what I mean. Like this was November. Right. You know what I mean? It's like we've been growing this proverbial beard all year, but in some ways, I would say even having these 3 weeks where these mourning practices are more official, like not going to live music and growing hair, not getting haircuts, things like that, not having weddings, some of those things, and even for the 9 days before Tisha B'Av, not drinking wine, not eating meat, I think that some of those are actually serving as real containers for people. And the fasting at each end, real containers for people, because they're like, I actually need a ritual that expresses what I'm walking around with.
Right. It's so interesting. So first of all, I love your like breaking and destruction, kind of using those two ways to think about them.
Sad but true.
And I think, as you know, I'm a big believer that the Jewish calendar is built in a way that it allows us to return to certain questions, right? There was a whole debate about whether Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, should be its own day or should be commemorated on the 9th of Av as a way of like, okay, this is our day where we focus on all of our destruction. We'll get to post-October 7th in a second, but just very high level for you. So like, what do you think the calendar is asking of us? What is the calendar asking of the Jewish people that, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, most beautiful time of the year is the summer. People want to be swimming and getting haircuts and having fun and having weddings. And we have 3 weeks of mourning where there's no concerts and we're facing, as you called it, breakage and then destruction. What's the tradition asking of us?
So I actually think one of the things, at least, right? I can't say what's the tradition asking of us. I can say one of the things that I think the tradition is asking of us is not to get distracted. Meaning, you could be under the most beautiful sun, and there could be real issues to deal with. And I'm not saying don't go out and play, right? Of course, go out and play. You need that. That's part of what life is. But I think the ability to actually live in a sense of what's real, even if something else looks a certain way on the surface, I think that's very deep. I mean, I've spent years of my life engaging in these 3 weeks practices where everything felt fine. And I was like, this is super weird.
Right.
Like I'm now connecting to something that's very old, but nothing feels broken right now.
Right.
And meaning even if I were to say that my ultimate aspiration is to see something else, but like nothing felt broken. And then I gotta be honest, the last 4 years since the start of Corona, I haven't had a 3 weeks where something didn't feel really, really broken. And this year, it's not like a proverbial brokenness. It's the brokenness that the 17th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av, these 3 weeks, is actually talking about. It's the brokenness of the Jewish commonwealth.
Right.
It's a scary existential question about the future of the Jewish commonwealth. And I think we got to take that seriously. And we do take it seriously. We do take it seriously, obviously. But I think the mismatch between what it feels like outside and what it feels like inside, that's important to take note of.
Right, it's interesting. I think like traditionally we have these moments, like at a wedding where someone steps on the glass, right? And there's disagreements about what that's for, but certainly one of the ways to think about that is remembering the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash,
of the temple.
So at this peak moment of joy, we take a moment to be aware of the either unfinished things or the painful things of our past. And it's certainly since October 7th, we saw people grapple with. I remember like the first bar or bat mitzvah I went to, or the first wedding I went to, both in Israel and America, you had people navigating like, are you allowed to be happy now or not? It goes to this like feeling of mourning a little bit. Okay,
totally.
We say Tehillim, like, so I think that's been a thing navigating. So what I really want to, I guess, I'm looking to you for, as I would on or off camera,
You're the best.
Which is to think meaningfully around like, okay, you're well versed in the ways things have come across, the themes that have come up, the liturgy around this. What can we look to? What are some ideas that are being pulled out of the, let's call it the from breakage to destruction experience that you think can help inform how we think about what's going on in the world today?
Amazing. Okay, so I want to say two big things. One is I've been thinking a lot about the prophets that we read during this time. So, or who are actually sort of the messengers and the harbingers of this biblically. So like Yeshayahu, Isaiah, Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, Yechezkel, Ezekiel. And this year I'm very taken by the fact, specifically Yeshayahu and Yirmiyahu, Isaiah and Jeremiah. Jeremiah is the rebuker. Okay, it's hilarious. The rabbis basically say when he came out of his mother's womb, he rebuked his mother for something. And she's like, oh gosh, where is this going, right? He's the rebuker. He tells the people, you're doing the wrong thing. This is a problem. This is bad, right? Yeshayahu, Isaiah, is the consoler. So yeah, he doesn't shirk responsibility from saying, I think things are not going right. But he's there also to say, it's gonna be okay. We're going to rebuild. And I've been thinking a lot about how hard it is to be a Jewish leader in this time. And not just a Jewish leader, but somebody who's watching what's going on in the world. And when are the times where you call something out, where you say, hey, this is not right. This is not the right thing. And when are the times where you're just there to console, right? So that's the first thing. Just even thinking about what your orientation is, right? You're reading the news. That's so terrible. Or that. It's really, I think that's really difficult to figure out where you want to be. And I really think it's important that our tradition has both.
Right.
Really, really do. Right?
Right. And I'll just play that out with you for a second practically. What that brings up for me is thinking about the rebuking of college campuses, people feeling like, you're doing this wrong, or this person's being anti-Semitic, or I'm unhappy with the government's choice to do X, Y, Z, like these moments of like, you're wrong and I want to scream about it. And then, right, also the moments that you're alluding to of the like going to Israel, visiting people, consoling those who are in pain, spending time with them. It's like two different gut reactions of where to run when this happens.
Yeah, totally. And it's funny because Yirmiyahu is such a political prophet.
Right.
It's like, I once read an interview with Heschel where he said, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, where he said, people said, you're a rabbi, why are you getting involved in politics? So he said, well, the prophets were probably very bad rabbis then, right? But Yirmiyahu was like key. He was actually trying to give them political advice. He's like, you should just surrender to the Babylonians, this first temple, you should surrender to the Babylonians, trust me, you're not gonna win, you should get rid of it. And it's like, you traitor, how dare you, you traitor, right? So he rebuked them, they rebuked him. But I do think that there's an element where we sort of, in our anger, we want to figure out how to fix it. So it could be the rebuke of college campuses. It could be the rebuke of the Israeli government. It could be the rebuke of the army for not showing up. It's right, like on October 7th.
Right.
It could be, it's that, I want to fix, I want to fix, I want to fix. And I think consolation, what we call nechama, is I can't fix this. I'm just going to sit here with you. And that itself is going to allow you to continue on. And those two things, they're both important, to be honest. I would not take away the importance of rebuke. It is important. But if you're using rebuke when you should be using consolation, and by the way, if you're using consolation when you should be using rebuke, or my favorite, if you rebuke only the other side, but you don't rebuke your own side, it's like, no, that's not what Yirmiyahu was doing. He was rebuking his own. Right? So there's a lot there. So that I would say is my first big theme that I'm thinking about.
I think there's some parenting Torah hidden in there also, by the way.
I mean, obviously. When is there not parenting Torah? Every interaction that we have literally starts from when we are babies and our parents, and then we become parents and we have babies, right? Obviously, not everybody is in that exact cycle, but anybody who's alive started with a relationship to whoever their caretaker was, right? And it colors everything.
All right, when to rebuke, when to console. I got to put that on my...
Right, You're like, let me talk to my kids about this, or maybe not talk to my kids about this. But right?
Okay, number two.
The second thing that I'm thinking about very much is I don't think that there is necessarily like an end in sight. Like, really. And I also...
An end to the war?
There might be an end to the war, but I don't think there's an end to regional instability. And regional instability didn't start on October 7th either. And so one of the things I'm also trying to think about is, how do you have double vision? Okay? Double vision is, to me, or the kind of double vision I'm talking about, is the ability to deal with the here and now, and not to forget the ability to dream beyond the here and now, right? And I think in general, by the way, activists talk about this all the time, to be able to have this kind of double lens, where you're going to bring people where you can bring them right now, but you also have to be able to dream. And I want to return...
Sorry, I'll interrupt and just say, for me, that's Shabbat, right? That's the whole idea of Shabbos, is like you spend all week working towards something, and then you need a day to like experience the ideal, you know, and then go back to doing the work again.
Right, meaning it's not, you're not going to be... You don't want to just be stuck in the forest with the trees. You sometimes want to look at the forest, right? Like, and you also sometimes you want to go to a different section of the forest, and you can't even imagine where that is.
Right.
And so I actually want to return to our rebuker. I want to return to Yirmiyahu. I want to return to Jeremiah, because there is a wild interaction in chapter 32 of his book. Okay. Yirmiyahu Perek Lamed Bet, as we might say in Hebrew.
Yes.
God says to Jeremiah, this is during a Babylonian siege of Jerusalem. God says to Jeremiah, I want you to buy land in Israel. Okay, now I am not a big business person, but that is a poor investment if you're about to be kicked out of the land. And so Jeremiah, he goes in front, he tells his scribe, I want you to write up this contract. He actually buys it from his cousin, who was having clearly financial trouble and had to sell his land. So like even him selling it to a fellow Jew seems ridiculous, right? Like, okay, sell it to the Babylonians. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not that I don't know if they would buy it, right? But meaning it's also a biblical responsibility if somebody's selling their land, if you're their family member, next of kin. It's a biblical responsibility. So Jeremiah like makes a whole big thing of it. He's like, okay, everybody, this is what we're doing. I'm buying the land. My scribe is writing it up. Everybody, we want to keep this contract in like earthenware jars so that we can keep it for a long time, because God says eventually there are going to be houses built here. Okay? And there are going to be fields planted here by the Jewish people. So this is amazing. He does this whole thing. It's amazing, amazing, amazing. And then he prays to God, and he says to God, why did I just buy a field if we're getting kicked out? Like, this makes no sense. And God's like, yeah, I get it. It makes no sense. It's a long-term vision. It does make sense in a long-term way. So don't stop thinking about the long-term because of the short-term. And I want to add one more sentence, which is the craziest thing, is that Jeremiah is the one who tells them, go to Babylonia and build houses there. Go to Babylonia and plant vineyards there. Same guy, right? So he's hedging his bets. He's not hedging his bets. He's thinking about the immediate needs. And God is pushing him to think about a long-term horizon that's beyond what he's going to live through, by the way.
Wow. So rebuke and console, and then plan
short-term,
to leave
long-term.
Israel and go buy land in the next place. And by the way, plan to buy land here.
And by the way, I'm not telling anybody that literal, that is not a linear anything. It's short-term, practical steps, incremental, and long-term ideas, moonshots, dreaming. It's hard to do.
Yeah, so that raises another question to me, which is like the theology of this, right? So I think that there is, it's a weird thing to be in relationship with God in Jeremiah's case and say like, okay, I'm on board, I'm going to buy land here and land there, and like, I think almost, a reaction that I heard in many communities after October 7th was like, how could this happen? Right, that sense of as you said, there's let's call it, breach and then destruction, right? Is that
like breakage. I think of it as breakage because it's like you just...
And destruction, right? So this was like one of those big moments, Rabbi Reuven Leichter, I'm a big fan of his, he said like, in that moment, you need to reevaluate your relationship with God and your relationship with the Jewish people. Right? Those two, you have to think about them. And there's been a break here. Something's going on. Something was broken. You could say in the physical world there was a break. There was a breach because security was broken. An actual breach, right? And you have that same question emerging in the times of the temple around this time of year also, right? This idea of like, wait, I don't understand. I thought that as long as you promised us, we'd have Israel and we'd have the temple and you would protect us. How could you let these bad things happen to us? So how do you, first of all, looking back then and thinking about that question, what do you bring out? And perhaps we can apply that to thinking about today.
Yeah, so here's the interesting thing. When you look in biblical literature, they tell the Jews, this is happening.
Right.
It's going to happen because you're bad.
Right.
Right? Now,
what's their bad, by the way?
They're bad: idolatry, murder, sexual impropriety, deep corruption, right? Like deep corruption. And there it's like, oh, clear as day, okay. But even when Jeremiah says it to them, they want to kill him. They actually want to lynch him because they're like, who do you think you are? You're right? And I would say that in terms of that theology, that's a prophetic theology. Where like you talk to God, God tells you, and you know. We don't live in that reality, right? And even when you look in the Talmud, they didn't live in that reality. They have so many reasons that they give for the destruction of the Second Temple that it's almost like they're basically telling you, we don't know, right? And I think what I feel, especially with so much post-Holocaust theology, what I feel is something to the effect of, like it's a three-parter. You ready?
Okay.
One is, I clearly have no idea how God works in the world. I think in some ways, after the Shoah, I think after the Holocaust, I would basically say God is both inscrutable, meaning we do not know how God works, and dependable, because the covenant continues somehow, right? That's one.
Inscrutable and dependable.
Yeah, which is a crazy combination.
Yeah.
Okay?
I don't think I've heard that language.
Because I was once giving a talk, and a Holocaust survivor raised his hand and said, how are you even talking about it? And I said, I got to tell you, what brings me to synagogue every week is that I believe that God is inscrutable and also dependable. Wow. And that is not new. Just read Psalms, read Tehillim. That is not new. The rabbis worked on their theology because they were living in a post-temple world, and they were like, I don't get it. Is the covenant over? The covenant can't be over. We have to, right? So there's this continued attempt to maintain a relationship even amidst major questions and instability. So that's the first sort of the inscrutable and dependable combination. The second thing I want to say is I think that the most convincing post-Holocaust theology I have seen, and I mean, who am I? But just a human. The most convincing post-Holocaust theology I have seen is that you can't have free will unless God allows people to do terrible things, which is terrible. Which is terrible. But it may be true. But it may be true. And I think that's, I'm sorry.
No, but yes, but that feels less on the nose for me here, because I think usually our theology is almost like phrased as like, the destruction of the temple was not because like bad people came to destroy the temple. It was because the Jewish people were no longer deserving of the temple.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. That's not where we are right now.
Yeah, I'm saying.
These three all exist together in my mind.
Great.
Meaning they really do all exist together.
Right. It's almost like messengers are sent to punish the Jewish people is like the theology.
Yeah, that's the way that it's. But that's not where.
Right, so why is free will core here then? Yeah.
What do you mean? If human beings have free will, God's not stopping a Hamas agent from coming in and doing what they're doing. What God's going to just put a wall in front of them?
Right. But like, it doesn't feel like that's part of the breach in theology for me there. Because,
that's pretty big. I'm just saying, meaning Israel just experienced an exilic moment in the midst of a redemptive reality.
Right.
That is so mind-bending from a theological perspective. And one of the things I think it basically tells you is like, there are bad people in the world who want to do bad things. God doesn't always put a fence in front of them so that they can't. In fact, the IDF was supposed to be that fence, and they didn't show up.
Okay.
Right? Like that's what I'm talking about. Meaning I think that sense of a feature of this world. It's the world we see, is that human beings are allowed to perpetrate terrible evils on other human beings.
God, so it's that God doesn't intervene in those. If we're talking about theology, it's that.
Correct.
This is no longer the people mess up and so they get punished part of it.
No.
This is
in order for there to be free will, you can't. I mean, I want to drink this, so God's going to stop me from drinking this.
Right.
I want to throw this against the wall. God's going to stop me from growing. Meaning, I think where it becomes really, really difficult is that this is not like one act of one person. This is like a major collective trauma and drama of the Jewish people. And you're sort of like, wait, if there's this covenant, why doesn't God intervene? Right? So I get it. Meaning this is why I have three parts, because
they go together.
None of them, I'm just saying, none of them answers it. None of them answers it, right?
Okay.
And then I would say the
inscrutable,
third.
dependable is part one. Part two is free will. Part three.
Part three. This is the hardest part.
Yeah.
Okay? I think the hardest part is, I'm the type of person, I'm going to say it like this. We have a long history of crying out to God and saying, where were you? Long history. And there's something absolutely fascinating about talking to God in the second person, saying, where were you? Or please appear. Because at one and the same time, it's telling you, hey. And by the way, we have that even in places where we blame ourselves for things that happened. We do, right? But I do think that crisis, especially of this magnitude, is always an opportunity, must always be an opportunity for reflection and self-reflection and asking, how did we get here, right? So some people are going to give you answers, how did we get here? Because we sinned in this and that way. Other people are going to give you answers, how did we get here? The disunity of last year disrupted our defensive infrastructure in such a way that this was able to happen. But I think the instinct of reflecting, not in a prophetic time where somebody could say, well, how did this happen? We blame you because you did it. No. But in a sense of, anytime you experience something that is a major shattering, you want to ask, how did we get here? And how did we get here is generally not only a question about what somebody else did. It also may be a question about what we did or didn't do. And I leave that to people to fill in the content of it, but I'm comfortable with the container of it, right? And you notice what I'm not doing, because I really think that if you don't live in prophetic times, I really think you can't do it. What I'm not doing is saying, this is the reason for this shattering. To me, theologically, it's a step of taking God's voice where I don't have it. So I'd rather live with God's inscrutable, and I'm going to sit here and say, hey, but you're also dependable. Come. Why aren't you here? Come, right? I'm also going to take the piece of, yeah, human beings are going to do terrible things to other human beings. That is a feature of the world, right? And clearly a feature of human free will. And I'm going to say, here we are in this shattering. We must reflect on how we got here. And everybody's going to have a different answer. Even people who go with the sin route. Is your sin being too open or not open enough? Is your sin being too fractured or not fractured enough? Is it right? And it's like, we don't know. And I think that humility is what leads me to say, okay, so let's move forward together and do what Jews have been doing for thousands of years, which is try to continue the relationship amidst breakage.
Which relationship?
With God. The Jewish people and God. Try to continue it amidst breakage. It's very painful. We've been doing it forever, because how do you maintain a relationship between a God who you cannot see, a God whose will you do not understand, but can only try to, address, not address, come close to, approximate it
Okay.
through what you have in your tools of your revelation and your tools of interpretation. You have to be able to admit at some point that it's going to take work, and that answers are not coming readily. They're really, really not. And it's so interesting. There's a rabbinic discussion at the end of a tractate called Makot, or Makot.
I thought you were going to say lashes.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what in English, hitting. That really doesn't sound as, but there's a discussion of, okay, so how many divine commands are there, right? So they come up with the term 613. People are very love 613. It was created by a person named Rabbi Simlai in the Talmud, okay? There's 613. Nowhere in the Bible does it say there's 613. But he came up with 613. He's like, 613. But this is amazing. The Talmud then continues to try to narrow it down. They said, this prophet came and narrowed it down to 15. And this prophet came and narrowed it until they get to 1. You know what the 1 is? It's from a book called Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 4. It goes like this. A righteous person will live by their faith. Tzaddik be'emunato yechya. Now, I want to tell you, in its original context, it means a righteous person will live, as opposed to somebody who's not. Meaning it's that clarity of, if you're bad, this is what's going to happen to you, and if you're good, this is what's going to happen to you. The rabbis don't have that clarity, right? Even though sometimes they reach for that clarity. They don't have that clarity. They say, the way you should live is you should live with your faith, right? Like there's no promise of a light at the end of the tunnel. Living with faith is exactly what it is that they're trying to do in the world, and it's very hard. It's very hard, and you can't deny the reality of people who aren't going to go there, right? But that's very real to actually say, I'm going to live in this.
Yeah. Say more. Why aren't they going to go there?
Why aren't some people going to go there?
Which parts do you think are not goable for them, and why?
I just think that when people have been through pain, and also if you can't access the divine in that way, right?
Yeah.
Meaning, then it's just a question of whether people want to try to hold on like that. Right? And it's also managing cognitive dissonance. It's also just the not knowing of it. It's also, some people are more science people. Do you know what I mean? Like they're not going there, which I think is important to recognize also. But I just want to point out, I don't think, and I don't think it should be the case that a religious personality should lead you not to look at the rational and the science and the realpolitik. Like that, to me, is to divorce the two is very, very dangerous to me.
Great. I have a few questions.
Sure.
One is, I know you said there's no answer. But
I gave you 3 answers.
No, but you said there's no and this is what it is.
I gave you 3 partial answers.
You gave us a framework to think about how to live through a time of crisis, I think is what you're saying. Is that what it is?
Essentially.
It's kind of, and instead
Well, I'm talking about living as a person who believes in a covenant between God and the Jewish people. Right? There are lots of ways to live through a time of crisis.
Yes.
But
great.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Just to specify. Yes.
Wait, so two questions in there. One is...
wait, what's your answer to this question? You're not getting off that easy.
Yeah. Okay.
You're a grandchild of Holocaust survivors.
Yeah.
You're a student of Rabbi Yitzhak Greenberg. Like, what's your take on it?
Okay, fair. I don't have it organized in the way that you organized it. I'll say that a couple of themes that I think about. On one end of the spectrum, I have Rabbi Yitzhak Greenberg in my ear saying, you can't explain away any of these things unless you'd be comfortable sharing it with, a child burning alive during the Holocaust, And if it doesn't pass that test, stop talking. So I think it's very hard to talk about some of these challenges. I'll say on the other end of the spectrum, I think for me, certainly in previous years, I think this year more, I think of these 3 weeks as a time to look into what I'll call bitachon, which is trust. The idea of really investigating our relationship with God. And I think that it's very easy. It's almost like the rebuke and console thing that you mentioned earlier. It's very easy to focus on ways God might seem not dependable or less dependable in any given era. And I think like any other relationship, trying to move towards God instead of away from God is the challenger. It's almost like a call home. It's like a can I think about my relationship with God, and what steps can I take to feel closer to God and to lean into that trust? And we could talk for a long time about how to build trust. I think that's its own area. But for me, that's like the core challenge of this zone. And then I think, October 7th, one of the things that comes up if we're talking about destruction is a breach of that trust. The same way the Holocaust feels like a breach of that trust. So when you're in a relationship and the trust gets broken, you say, was the trust broken because I pushed someone away? Was the trust broken because I wasn't investing in the relationship? Was the trust broken because the other person totally messed up, nothing to do with me? I think if you look at Eicha too, I'm not an expert, but Yael Ziegler's book on Lamentations.
Such a good book. Everyone should read that book.
So
it's very long.
It is
so
very
even
long.
just read 10 pages, you'll get something deep out of it. I'm not joking.
And this is
when is she coming on the show?
She was on to talk about Root.
Oh, I'm so glad.
It was amazing.
That's great.
Yeah, it was great.
She's special.
She's very special.
Yeah.
So she explores that theme a little bit, that like there's this moment of what did we do wrong? Then this moment of what did you do wrong, you being God?
Yep.
And then there's somewhere in the middle where it's okay, there's somewhere in between that we need to land. And I think that to me feels like a time to investigate the relationship and to be aware of when we're rebuking, when we're consoling, when we're blaming, when we're looking at ourselves.
It's beautiful. I think that's beautiful. No, it really is. It's very relational, right? Mm-hmm. Meaning I'm giving sort of like the philosophical pieces. Person, I pray every day.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's so weird because I'm praying today when Hania was just assassinated.
Yeah.
I also prayed yesterday, said the same words. So is there something that's changing, or is it actually the steadfastness of the fact that nothing is changing in terms of that? And for me, it's very much the steadfastness, meaning that idea of tzaddik be'emunah tzaddik, a righteous person lives by their faith. It's like, this is a marathon. It's a marathon, right? Like, I really believe that, even though sometimes it feels crazy.
Yeah.
Like, wait, what? I'm so at a loss. And there are definitely times where I feel that sense of betrayal. I mean, it's just really, 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 really hard. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a believer in easy answers, but I am a believer in continuing to develop that relationship. However you develop that relationship, right? Like, is an individual relationship, is a collective relationship. Like, part of what gives me solace is it's actually a collective relationship with the Jewish people. Meaning our tradition is not, oh, God loves you and God loves you. It's God has a relationship with the Jewish people. And I might not see certain things in my lifetime, but that's part of why the humility of being part of this is so compelling to me. Mm-hmm. It's that it's not actually all about me and my personal relationship. It's a much, much, much bigger story. And sometimes that can feel anonymous, but other times that can feel like you're really part of something much bigger.
So you're raising a few things for me now. Also, I'll indulge and share a little as well.
Please do.
Thanks, Elana. Two things. One is I just wanted to mention that prayer is, it goes in waves for me. There are times in my life where it feels like it's really worked, and times that it feels like I'm going through motions, let's say. I've gotten, for better or worse, a lot more into Torah study than prayer as ways to connect with the divine, let's say. Sometimes I wonder if I've replaced the divine with text study. We could talk about that longer if you do.
By the way, people wonder that about the centrality of Torah study that emerges after the fall of the temple.
Right.
That it's like a way to hold on to God in some way.
Right. But it's actually something that I've really turned to since October 7th in a meaningful way. I made an effort to try to attend the daily prayer more. I pray every day for a particular hostage because it feels manageable, and I'm starting to believe more in the power of prayer, which is the part of my body my brain that spent a lot of time in more intellectual circles and rational circles that says you need to figure out the philosophy and move it forward. What are you doing with all this prayer stuff? But I think I've leaned more into prayer now. So that's what you're raising to me is very interesting, the prayer piece, and I do believe in the power of prayer. We could talk about that a little bit longer also. The second thing I'll say is this question of the relationship piece that you pointed out. And I think that if I dig even deeper, I think more broadly, not just these 3 weeks, but more broadly, the whole idea of Torah and mitzvot and commandment in some ways is about relationship. That it's like we have, God is making demands of us in a relationship, and we are deciding how to navigate those demands. And I feel like it's creating a model for how we think about all the relationships in our life.
Yeah, I also think it creates relationships with fellow Jews.
Right.
Meaning, I'm sitting on the floor on the 9th of Av, reading this very sad liturgy in this very sad book of Lamentations, Eicha, and I'm connecting to people around me, even if I'm not talking to them, right? There's something to that also. There's also even connecting to the past, right? Like people who tell you, oh yeah, I use my grandmother's candlesticks to light Shabbat candles. That's not just a family heirloom thing, it's actually engaging in this practice. I think it's all about connection, right? Connecting with God, connecting with people, connecting with past, hopefully building a future, right? Like really important, but I'm 100% with you.
Right.
I'm 100% with you.
And it's interesting, by the way, because where you took it now, because I wanted to ask you that as well. A lot of what we focused on is reflecting on our relationship with God during this time. And I think you and I have actually had this discussion several years ago, where I think my answer at the time was that Tisha B'Av in the 3 weeks, the 9th of Av in the 3 weeks of time to notice your distance from God and to come closer.
Yeah.
And then you transition into Elul, where you focus on your relationships with others, was kind of how I thought of the calendar.
To get to the high holidays,
To get to the high holidays, you have this moment of like, first notice my distance from God, notice the mission I want to be on, I want to be in a relationship, then be inspired by that relationship to look at my other relationships and move towards, better relationships
Oh my gosh,
as I
we're
get
the
ready
opposite.
for the holiday. Yeah, so I want to hear you talk about like, what's the message for, first time what the opposite is, and also what's the message in terms of looking horizontally at the rest of the Jewish people now? Like what's the question of breaking the discussion now?
When I think about 3 weeks, I'm walking around with the dog tag.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm walking around with a dog tag, which on one side says, my heart is captive in Gaza, and on the other side says, together we're going to win. Those, by the way, in Israeli society seem to be opposing ideas, but sitting here in America, I can say both, which is okay.
Pray for both.
But pray for both, exactly. Pray for both, but you also have to do something to try to bring something about.
Yeah.
But I think that I am very pushed in times of crisis towards my fellow Jew. Meaning, I was reading, and this is in whoever watched that video from the summer, from the talk that I gave. I thought it was so fascinating. Emma Lazarus, she was like, a Jew? I'm not a Jew. Let's not talk about it in public. I'm a poet. I'm an activist. I'm a literary phenom.
Yeah.
And then pogroms in Russia started. And she's like, I'm a Jew, everybody. Let's talk about how I'm a Jew, right? I'm very, very motivated by that during these weeks. To be able to say, I'm part of the Jewish people, not just in times when things are great, right? But in times when things are very, very difficult. And I lead up to the high holidays much more of a self-reflection period of like, where's my relationship with God?
Sure.
Where can it be? Where has it been? What's happened this last year? What might happen this? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's the opposite of what you're talking about, which is fine. Meaning there are two sides of a coin.
It's also interesting though. Because if we look at the 3 weeks in the practice, like we have a custom the month leading up to the high holidays to like call friends and apologize, to think about those relationships. To you, when you look at the 3 weeks, is there either in Talmud stories or in the halacha, do you see hints towards like looking more horizontally? Is this bar kamsa? Is that,
I mean, look, it's really true that the rabbinic tradition, one of the many reasons they give for the destruction of the Second Temple, is the problem of baseless hatred, which hatred is never baseless. There's always a reason. Why'd you vote for that one? I hate what you're doing to the world. No.
Yeah.
It's never baseless.
Yeah.
But let's just say, let's play with it, right? I don't think they mean baseless. But I think that the response to that, right? Of course, people would say the response to that, we have to love each other, we have to be together, we have to da-da-da. But here's the thing. Societies break down when people can't work together. But hatred is not the only reason why people can't work together, right? So to me, there's a call for stop talking about and start talking to, right? So here we are, incredibly polarized Israel, incredibly polarized America, incredibly polarized Jewish communities in some cases as a result. And what I'm asking is not, I want to give everybody a hug, but how do we actually continue as a people? How do we maintain ourselves as a people amidst the very real disagreements that we have that are actually important disagreements? So to me, it's less like, am I going to be nice to somebody? And it's more, how are we going to continue on as a collective? And I think that's incredibly hard, right? Incredibly hard. So you have questions to the right about, what do you think about the right-wing elements? You have questions to the left. What do you think about extreme progressive elements? And it's like, okay, where are we going, right? And I don't think that because we don't want to be too fractured, you don't want to build movements. Of course you want to build movements. You want to build movements that you think are good for the world, that are going to make things better. So to me, that's the real question of this period. It's not how are we going to be nicer to each other, but how are we going to figure out how to move together in the world given our major real and even moral disagreements that matter very much, right? And I think that's a much harder sell. I mean, I'm very, it's much easier for me to just be nice to people on the street. I'm always nice to people on the street. You know me, I'm nice to people on the street. That's easy for me.
I've never seen you not nice to
I'm saying, that's the easiest thing for me. But if we want to get into a situation where I think that what you're doing in the world is wrong and bad and dangerous, or you think what I'm doing in the world is wrong and bad and dangerous, that's where I want to know, like, okay, where do we go from here? I could be nice to you in the elevator, but where do we actually go from here? And I think that's what everybody's trying to figure out right now in the West, to be honest. Israel, America, I think that's what everybody's trying to figure out.
Yeah.
So I don't have an answer to that one.
Get rid of smartphones.
Get rid of get rid of social media. Good luck with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Good luck with that. Literally, is this going on social media? What we're talking about? Like, let's get rid of social media. How many views did we get for this? How many views did that?
Exactly.
We're in it. We're in it. We're just
Great.
trying to put good content in it, but it's
happening.
a crazy world.
The ship is flying. Great.
It's
All right, so
a crazy world.
You shared a little bit around how do we think about our relationship with God going through this crisis, and then you shared a little bit about how we might think about
our relationship with our collective.
Yeah. I want to ask the question, why be Jewish? Okay? I know this is like an 80s question that I think maybe is coming back now. Like they used to have all those books like Why Be Jewish?
There are a lot of things from the 80s that are coming back now. Scrunchies, I think. Right? There were scrunchies, or was that no, I was a little girl. Scrunchies. That's a thing.
Sure,
I'm like, those look ridiculous.
Scrunchies are back.
Scrunchies are back.
So it's an interest. I want to like scaffold it a little bit, and then I want to let you fly with it. On one hand, we have this moment now where like everyone is like you said, like the Emma Lazarus example you shared before, where you have people coming out of the woodwork who, you know,
Jewy.
Yeah, I'm Jewish. And of course, we lament that we need a crisis to bring us together, for sure.
All human beings, by the way, need that.
Right.
You're either clones of each other, or you need a crisis to bring you together.
Yeah.
This is like, I love how we're always surprised by it.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's what it is.
Yeah. But I think that there's a larger challenge, which is that we've spent, let's call it the last 3/4 of a century, saying we want to make sure there's never anti-Semitism or a Holocaust again. Right? If you look at the Pew survey, it was like 76%. The one thing most Jews agreed on was that remember the Holocaust, don't let it happen again.
I think also a lot of Jews were proud to be Jewish.
It was lower.
Okay, it was lower.
Yeah, I think the number one.
Grandchild of Holocaust survivors, you're on that.
I was just shocked. No, I was surprised by it. I was like, oh, we put our money and resources behind this. We got the message to people. Don't let the Holocaust happen again. It's important. And in that same survey, 70% of people had come across Holocaust denial, either first person, second person, or third person, right? So it's like, this is where we put all our resources. It's not working, right? And now we have another thing now, which we have to do. We have to fight this war. We have to fight anti-Semitism. We have to have what's called hasbara, explaining to people.
We have to bring the hostages home.
We have to bring the hostages home. All those things are live issues. But we're going to find ourselves in another space where we're going to have this question of, why should we be Jewish? And you might even argue it's not rational. Why be with the team that's under attack like constantly, or B, like the other stuff instead of just trying to survive? Like what?
Okay,
what's
you ready?
Yeah. You can start with yourself, by the way. You don't have to preach to the choir. Yeah.
It has reality because it's real.
Judaism is real?
Yup.
Same
Meaning, I'll put it like this.
You're not saying because you are born Jewish, it's your reality. That's not what you're saying. Or it is what you're saying.
Because there's a reality to it, right? Meaning we go through the world as human beings.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out purpose, relationships, connection. Like, we're just trying to figure it out. And what I would say is, if you're born Jewish, it's already there.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, like it's real. There's a deep history. There are incredibly inspiring, challenging, real ideas, commitments, experiences, opportunities. And I'm sort of like, it's like if you're, you know, it's like, you know, when your glasses are on your head.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny, my glasses are on my hat. That's hilarious. It's like, can you guys put in like googly eyes or something on my hat? I don't know what you guys can
We'll do a filter on Instagram.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. By the way, so I'm going to you. I'm like, Justin, have you seen my glasses?
Yeah.
Have you seen my glasses? Have you seen my glasses? I'm looking. I would love that pair of glasses looks amazing. You already have a pair of glasses.
Okay.
You already have one. You have one.
Okay.
Right. So what I'm essentially asking people is, when you realize that you already have a pair of glasses, what are you going to look at through them?
Right.
Right? And of course, Jews are Jews. They're going to look at this, they're going to look at that. But going back to that concept, for myself, it's, I have a pair of glasses already. Mm-hmm. And for me, that pair of glasses is deeply religious, deeply intellectual, deeply emotional. It's immersive. It relates to things that I eat and that I don't eat, that I think and that I don't think. People I prioritize and people who are further from me. Mm-hmm. Meaning all of it. I am immersed in a reality that I've been given, and I want to be part of it, and I want to connect to it. And I think for a lot of people who are realizing, wait a second, I got this Magen David, I got this Jewish star at my bat mitzvah, and now I'm wearing it 20 years later for the first time. I want to know, okay, what are you seeing through those glasses now? Besides 4 torn down posters of hostages, right? Are you learning something? Are you being challenged? Are you connecting to something? Are you feeling something deep? Are you going as deep with that as you do with other things? There's just opportunity. There's just opportunity. That's what I would say. That's really, really what I feel, because that is the purpose of life. It's the purpose of life, to be in reality, right? Something like that. Something like that. That's what I would say. Something like that.
Beautiful, thank you. All right, so Elana, we're going to close up. I want to say to those who are watching, check out Texting. It's
check
amazing.
out Texting.
The podcast, and check out Circumventing the Law, Rabbinic Perspectives on Loopholes and Legal Integrity. To anyone watching, if you have the opportunity to learn with Dr. Elana Stein Hain, I can't, it's a gift. The same way Judaism is a gift and it's a reality, it's a gift to learn from you and with you as always, Elana. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you to our viewers. I just like saying that.
Yeah, yeah,